something that's emerged in Scotland with Gina Davidson, LBC's Scotland political editor. This story concerns the census in Scotland. Gina, tell us about it.
Yeah, that's right. The census that was conducted in Scotland in 2022, Sheila, that was a year after it was done in England and Wales. It was delayed because of COVID. And what's come out, there's been a slow release of information from the census over the last few months as the National Records of Scotland, get down into the nitty-gritty and the data of it all. What's come out today is that almost 3,000 people answered the religious question, what religion would you say you are, with basically stating that they were a believer in biology. 2,883 people have written that, because you had to have a paper copy of the census to be able to do that rather than just doing it online. They have written that on their census forms and then sent them back to the government. And of course, this is all to do with what was happening in Scotland at that time, and which really an issue which hasn't gone away, which was around the Gender Recognition Reform Act, and also the fact that the census itself, the guidance for answering the question, what is your sex, basically allowed people to self-identify. So this was a campaign run by For Women Scotland, a feminist grassroots organisation, that said they wanted to protest about that. And they felt that one way to do that was to answer the question on religion as stating that you were a believer in biology. And just interestingly as well, Sheila, there was more people wrote that on their forms than answered that they were humanist or agnostic in this census, although it was still quite some way behind those who said they were Jedi Knights. So some really fascinating information in the census. But what is really interesting about this is that J.K. Rowling, the Harry Potter author, the millionaire, but used to be a billionaire, she has said that she was one of those people. She has tweeted that today on X, saying that she was one of those people that wrote that on her census form to show her protest about the fact that sex could be self-identified through the census. There was a huge sushi around that at the time as that census bill was going through Parliament. Joan McAlpine, an SNP MSP, she led the committee on that, and that was the first time she kind of got involved in this particular issue. She's no longer an MSP. She found herself rather some way down the selection at the last elections in 2021 and wasn't able to stand for her party. So it's fascinating to see this information now come out. And so almost 3,000 people, one would assume women, mostly saying that they are believers in biology on the census.
Organised?
Yeah, organised by For Women Scotland. They were asking people to do this as a protest, as I say, around the sex question. We've heard a professor up at Robert Gordon University, Professor Sarah Pedersen, saying that this was very similar to a protest that the suffragettes did back in the 1911 census, and that women were using the opportunity to use it to send a message to the government. So organised to an extent. I mean, it's not a massive number in terms of the numbers of people who answered the census, clearly, but just still very interesting that they felt moved enough to ask for a paper copy rather than do it more easily online, and do so that they could register the protest around those gender reforms that the government was trying to push through at that time.
It's a funny one, isn't it? Because it's clearly the protest behind it, the feelings behind it, the thoughts behind it are very serious, but I find it quite amusing, that protest.
It's a very novel way to do it, I suppose, but I think For Women Scotland, they're an interesting organisation, Sheila. They are quite a small collective of women, but they have inspired other groups right across Scotland to basically establish themselves to campaign on this issue. And they have had, some successes, and they are the group who, of course, are taking the Scottish Government to court around the definition of women in particular pieces of legislation here in the Scottish Parliament, because they believe that it's very confused, and they want the government to be very clear about what they mean. And I have to say as well, given this issue doesn't really ever go too far away away from the agenda here in Holyrood. I was asking John Swinney, the First Minister, about it when it comes to sport, because it's National Women and Girls Week in sport this week. At the beginning of this week, there was a debate in Parliament about it on Tuesday, and he was saying, well, as far as he's concerned, the Equality Act is very clear, crystal clear, in fact, that there can be exceptions carved out for things like sport and other single-sex services, which is a shift in the government's position.
It is, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, it wasn't what they were saying at the time when they were trying to.
Is that led by him, that
change,
shift, or is it led by the Cass review? Is it led by what's going on? Has the tide turned and he's noticed that?
I think it's possibly led by him in the sense that I don't think, well, he now, of course, has a minority government here because they no longer have that agreement with the Scottish Greens. And I don't think he wants to get into any fights, which might be seen as culture wars. I know that's how they're described. This issue is described by some people, and I think he's rather a cautious politician, and I think he would rather I would probably agree with you on that, Sheila. Other people describe them as culture wars.
Questions.
Yes,
very important questions.
And I think he's a much more cautious politician and probably sees that as maybe not where he wants to be come the 2026 Holyrood elections.
Thank you very much indeed, Gina. Always a pleasure to talk to you. Gina Davidson, LBC Scotland political editor.